The rain had just stopped, leaving the city streets shining under the bright lights of downtown. Robert Chen stepped out of his black car, straightening his expensive suit jacket. At 52 years old, he had everything most people dreamed of. His technology company was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He owned 3 houses, drove cars that cost more than most people's yearly salary, and his name appeared on magazine covers regularly. But tonight, as he walked toward the grand hotel entrance for another charity event, Robert felt the same emptiness that had been following him for years. His phone buzzed constantly with business calls, but no one ever called just to see how he was doing. His huge house felt cold and quiet every evening. Success had brought him wealth, but it had also brought loneliness. The charity gala was the kind of event Robert attended every month. Rich people gathered to write checks, take photos, and feel good about themselves. He would shake hands, make small talk about stock prices and vacation homes, then go home to his empty mansion. It was all part of the routine that had become his life. As Robert approached the hotel's golden revolving doors, he noticed the usual crowd of photographers and curious onlookers gathered behind velvet ropes. Some people held up phones, hoping to catch a glimpse of celebrities or wealthy business owners. Others simply watched, dreaming of a life they would never have. That's when he saw her. A little girl stood near the valet parking area, far from the crowd but close enough to see everyone walking into the hotel. She looked about 8 years old, with long dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were clean but clearly not expensive. She wore a pink sweater that was slightly too big and jeans that had been washed many times. What caught Robert's attention wasn't her appearance, though. It was what she was holding. In her small hands was a piece of cardboard with words written in careful, childish handwriting. Even from a distance, he could make out some of the letters. Most people walked past her without even noticing. The wealthy guests were too focused on their phones or conversations to pay attention to a little girl standing quietly by herself. The photographers were busy adjusting their cameras. The security guards were watching for potential problems, but something made Robert stop and look closer. The girl wasn't asking for money like some of the homeless people who sometimes gathered near expensive hotels. She wasn't trying to sell anything or cause trouble. She was just standing there, holding her sign, watching the people in fancy clothes walk by. Robert found himself walking toward her instead of into the hotel. As he got closer, he could read the words on her cardboard sign more clearly. Father, daughter, Dance, Lincoln Elementary School was written in blue marker, with little hearts drawn around the edges. The girl noticed him approaching and looked up. Her eyes were big and brown, and Robert could see a mixture of hope and nervousness in them. She seemed to be gathering courage for something. "Excuse me, sir?" she said in a small but clear voice. Robert stopped walking and looked down at her. Up close, he could see that she had been standing there for a while. Her shoes were slightly wet from the rain, and she was shivering a little in the cool evening air. "Yes?" Robert said, surprised by how gentle his own voice sounded. The girl took a deep breath, like she was about to jump into a cold swimming pool. She looked directly into his eyes with the kind of brave honesty that only children possess. "Sir, could you be my father for just one day?" The words hit Robert like a physical blow. In all his years of business meetings, negotiations, and high-pressure situations, no one had ever asked him anything that caught him so completely off guard. He stood there, staring at this little girl, feeling like the world had suddenly stopped. Spinning, for a moment, he couldn't speak. The sounds of the city, car horns, distant music from the hotel, people talking, all seemed to fade away. It was just him and this brave little girl who had asked the most unexpected question he had ever heard. Robert started to say something, but the words wouldn't come. The girl seemed to understand his shock. She held up her sign so he could see it better. "There's a dance at my school tomorrow night," she explained, her voice getting a little stronger. "All the other kids are going with their dads, but I don't have one." Robert felt something twist in his chest. He looked around, suddenly aware that people might be watching this strange conversation. A few passers-by had slowed down, curious about why a wealthy businessman was talking to a little girl on the street. "Where's your mother?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She's working, the girl said, pointing toward the hotel. She cleans the offices upstairs at night. She doesn't know I'm down here. I was supposed to wait in the employee break room, but I saw all the fancy people coming in, and I thought—" She trailed off, looking suddenly embarrassed. "I thought, maybe one of them might be nice enough to help me. Just for one evening. I know it's silly." Robert's mind was racing. This child had left the safety of the employee area and come outside to ask strangers for help. The courage that must have taken was incredible. Most adults wouldn't have the bravery to approach wealthy, powerful people and ask for such a personal favor. "It's not silly," Robert said quietly. The girl's face brightened a little. "Really?" Before Robert could answer, he heard quick footsteps behind him. A woman was hurrying toward them, her face filled with worry and embarrassment. She was wearing a simple uniform, the kind worn by cleaning staff. Her hair was pulled back, and she looked tired in the way that comes from working multiple jobs. "Isabella, what are you doing out here?" the woman said as she reached them. Then she saw Robert's expensive suit, and her face went pale. "Oh no, sir, I am so sorry. She wasn't supposed to bother anyone. Please don't call security." Robert looked at the woman, Isabella's mother, and saw exhaustion mixed with fierce protectiveness. This was someone who worked hard every day to take care of her daughter, who probably worried constantly about money and safety and whether she was doing enough. "She wasn't bothering me," Robert said gently. Isabella's mother looked confused. Rich people usually didn't speak kindly to hotel cleaning staff. "She was asking you something, wasn't she?" "I told her to stay in the break room while I worked." "But she must have ... Mom," Isabella interrupted. "I asked him about the dance." Her mother's embarrassment deepened. "Isabella, we talked about this. I explained why you can't go." "But all my friends are going," Isabella said, her voice getting smaller. "They keep talking about what dresses they're going to wear and what they're going to do with their dads." Robert watched this conversation and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. It was like a wall inside his chest was starting to crack. Here was a little girl who just wanted to experience something normal, something that other kids took for granted. And here was a mother who was probably working herself to exhaustion, but still couldn't give her daughter everything she wanted. The mother looked at Robert again. "Sir, I'm really sorry about this. Come on, Isabella. We need to go back inside." But Robert found himself speaking before he could think about what he was saying. "Wait," he said. "Tell me about this dance." Both Isabella and her mother stared at him in surprise. Around them, the city continued its busy evening rhythm, but for these three people, everything had suddenly become very quiet and very important. Isabella looked up at Robert with eyes that seemed much older than her 8 years. She clutched her handmade sign tighter and took a small step forward, as if getting closer might help her explain better. "It's tomorrow night at my school," she began, her voice gaining confidence. "All the kids in my class have been talking about it for weeks. Everyone gets to dress up really fancy, and there's music and dancing and special food." Her mother, Carmen, stood frozen beside them, still not quite believing that this wealthy stranger was actually listening to her daughter. She had spent years teaching Isabella to be polite around the hotel guests, to stay invisible, to never bother important people. But here was one of the most important-looking people she had ever seen, and he was asking Isabella to continue. "The dance starts at 7 o'clock, Isabella went on, warming up to her subject. "Mrs. Rodriguez, that's my teacher, she told us we could bring our dads or our granddads or even our uncles. But I don't have any of those." Robert felt something heavy settle in his stomach. "What about your father?" he asked gently. Isabella's face didn't change much, but Robert noticed her mother's jaw tighten. "He left when I was little," Isabella said matter-of-factly. "Mom says he went to find work in another city, but he never came back." "That was a long time ago," Carmen finally found her voice. "Sir, you really don't need to hear all this. Isabella, we should go back upstairs. I still have 3 more floors to clean before my shift ends." But Robert held up a hand. Something about this conversation was pulling him in deeper than he had expected. "How long have you worked here?" he asked Carmen. 2 years, she replied. cautiously. I work here 5 nights a week, from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning. It's good work. Steady. And during the day? Carmen looked uncomfortable talking about her life with a stranger, especially one who was clearly wealthy and powerful. But Isabella answered for her. Mom works at the diner on 5th Street in the mornings, Isabella said proudly. She makes the best pancakes in the whole city, and on weekends she cleans houses in the rich neighborhoods. Robert did quick math in his head. If Carmen worked at the hotel until 2 in the morning, then started at the diner in the morning, she was probably getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep each night. And weekends were filled with more work instead of rest. That's a lot of jobs, Robert said quietly. Carmen lifted her chin a little. We do what we have to do. Isabella is a good student. She gets good grades, she stays out of trouble, and she helps me count the tip money every night to make sure we have enough for groceries. I'm really good at math, Isabella added. Mom taught me how to add up all the coins and bills. Sometimes we have enough left over for ice cream. The simple pride in Isabella's voice made Robert's chest ache. Here was a child who got excited about leftover change for ice cream, while Robert spent more money on a single dinner than this family probably saw in a month. Tell me more about the dance, Robert said, surprising himself. He had completely forgotten about the charity gala happening just 50 feet away inside the hotel. Isabella's entire face lit up. Well, everyone has been talking about their dresses. Katie got a new pink one with sparkles, and Mia's mom bought her silver shoes that make clicking sounds when she walks. And all the dads have been practicing dancing with their daughters. She paused, and some of the excitement faded from her voice. I was going to wear my church dress, the blue one that Mom got me last Christmas, but then I realized I wouldn't have anyone to dance with anyway. So you decided not to go? Robert asked. I was going to tell Mrs. Rodriguez that I was sick, Isabella admitted. But that would be lying, and Mom always says lying is wrong. So I thought maybe I could just stay home and read instead. Carmen's eyes were starting to fill with tears, though she was trying hard not to let them fall. Isabella, honey, we talked about this. Maybe next year? But Mom, next year all my friends will be in different classes. And besides, they have the father-daughter dance every year. It's not like it's going to be different next year. The logic was heartbreaking in its simplicity. Isabella understood perfectly well that her situation wasn't going to change. There would be no father figure appearing in their lives, no sudden change in their financial situation that would make these kinds of events easier. Robert found himself studying this little girl more carefully. Despite everything she was dealing with, there was something remarkably strong about her. She wasn't whining or throwing a tantrum. She wasn't feeling sorry for herself. She had simply identified a problem and tried to find a solution, even if that solution involved approaching scary strangers outside a fancy hotel. You said all your friends are going? Robert asked. All of them, Isabella nodded. 23 kids in my class, and I'm the only one who doesn't have someone to take me. Well, Tommy's dad is in the army somewhere far away, but his grandpa is coming instead, and this was your idea? To come down here and ask someone? Isabella glanced at her mother, then back at Robert. Mom doesn't know I was planning this. I saw all the people in nice suits coming into the hotel, and I thought maybe one of them might understand. Maybe one of them might remember what it was like to be a kid who wanted something really badly. The words hit Robert harder than he expected. When was the last time he had wanted something really badly? When was the last time he had felt that pure, hopeful desire that children have before the world teaches them to expect disappointment? Carmen was shaking her head. Isabella, you can't just ask strangers for favors like this. This gentleman has important things to do. Look at how he's dressed. He probably has meetings and business to take care of. She turned to Robert with an apologetic expression. Sir, I'm really sorry about this. She's a good kid, but sometimes she gets ideas. She gets ideas about solving her own problems, Robert said. That's not something to apologize for. Carmen looked surprised. Most wealthy people she encountered at the hotel barely acknowledged her existence, let alone complimented her daughter. Robert looked down at Isabella, who was watching him with those serious brown eyes. "You really want to go to this dance?" "More than anything," she said simply. "And you thought a complete stranger might help you?" Isabella considered this question carefully. "My teacher says that sometimes good things happen when you're brave enough to ask for help. She says that most people want to be kind, but they don't always know how. So maybe if I asked politely, someone might want to help me have one perfect night." Robert felt something crack inside his chest. Here was a child who still believed in the basic goodness of people, despite having every reason to be cynical. Her father had abandoned her family struggled financially, and she was watching her mother work herself to exhaustion just to keep them afloat. But Isabella still believed that strangers might be kind, that good things were possible, that one perfect night was worth asking for. "Isabella," Robert said slowly, "what if I told you that I don't know how to dance very well?" Her eyes widened. "You mean you might actually ... "I mean, I'm thinking about it," Robert said. "But I want to know what I'm getting myself into." Isabella practically bounced on her toes. "Oh, it's easy. Mrs. Rodriguez taught us some steps in class. You just hold hands and move back and forth mostly. And there's food and music and everyone gets their picture taken." Carmen was staring at Robert like he had just spoken a foreign language. "Sir, you can't be serious. You don't even know us." But Robert was looking at Isabella, thinking about the last time anyone had been genuinely excited to spend time with him. The last time someone had looked at him and seen not a bank account or a business opportunity, but simply a person who might help make something wonderful happen. "What's your favorite color, Isabella?" he asked. "Blue," she said immediately. "Like, the ocean. And what time does this dance start?" 7 o'clock tomorrow night." Robert pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his calendar. He had 3 business meetings scheduled for tomorrow evening. Important meetings, the kind that usually took priority over everything else in his life. "Well," he said, closing the phone and looking down at Isabella's hopeful face, "I guess I better learn how to dance." The silence that followed Robert's words seemed to stretch on forever. Carmen stood there with her mouth slightly open, not quite believing what she had just heard. Isabella's eyes were so wide they looked like they might pop out of her head. Even the sounds of the busy street seemed to fade away as the 3 of them stood in their own little bubble of possibility. "You really mean it?" Isabella whispered, her voice so quiet that Robert had to lean down to hear her. Robert looked at this little girl who had somehow managed to crack open something inside him that had been locked away for years. He thought about his empty house, waiting for him, his calendar full of meaningless meetings, his life that was successful on paper but felt hollow in reality. "I mean it," he said, "but we need to do this right." Carmen finally found her voice. "Sir, we can't ask you to do this. You don't understand. We don't have money for a fancy dress or shoes or anything that the other kids will have." Isabella would stand out, and not in a good way. Robert held up his hand gently. "That's exactly what I mean by doing this right. If Isabella is going to this dance, she's going to go properly. She deserves to feel just as special as every other little girl there." He knelt down so he was at Isabella's eye level. Up close, he could see the hope and fear fighting each other in her expression. "Isabella, I want to ask you something important. Are you sure this is what you want? Because once we start planning this, there's no backing out. You'll have to trust me to make good choices for you." Isabella nodded so hard her ponytail bounced. "Yes, sir. I trust you." The simple faith in her voice made Robert's throat tight. When was the last time anyone had trusted him completely without wanting something in return? He stood up and looked at Carmen, who was still staring at him like he was some kind of strange creature. "I know this is unusual," he said. "I know you don't know me. But I want to help, and I want to do it right." Carmen shook her head slowly. "I don't understand. Why would you want to do this? You're obviously a very important person. You probably have family of your own, important places to be." Robert was quiet for a moment. How could he explain that he had money but no family? That he had important places to be but nowhere he actually wanted to go? That this little girl's simple request had somehow shown him how empty his successful life really was? Let's just say that Isabella reminded me of something I had forgotten, he said finally. What's that? Isabella asked, tilting her head curiously. That sometimes the most important things aren't business meetings or fancy parties. Sometimes the most important thing is just making sure someone feels special. Isabella smiled so brightly that Robert felt like the sun had come out from behind a cloud. Carmen was still struggling with the situation. But sir, we don't even know your name, and this is so much to ask of a stranger. You're right, Robert said. My name is Robert. Robert Chun? And you're Carmen, and this is Isabella. Now we're not strangers anymore. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his business card. Carmen took it with shaking hands and read the name. Her face went pale again. You're Robert Chun? The Robert Chun? From Chun Technologies, Robert nodded. He was used to this reaction when people realized who he was. Usually it meant the end of any normal conversation, as people either became nervous or started asking for things, but Isabella just looked confused. Who's Robert Chun? Carmen looked at her daughter, then back at Robert. He's very famous, honey, very successful. Oh, Isabella said, not seeming particularly impressed. Are you good at dancing, though? Because that's what's important. For tomorrow night. Robert laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. I guess we'll find out. Carmen was reading his business card over and over like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Mr. Chun, I don't know what to say, this is too much. We can't accept this kind of help from someone like you. Someone like me? Robert asked. Someone so important. Someone who probably has better things to do than take a little girl to a school dance. Robert thought about his evening plans. He was supposed to go into the hotel, shake hands with people he didn't really like, write a check to a charity he'd forget about by next week, and then go home to his empty house and eat dinner alone while checking emails. Trust me, he said. I don't have better things to do. Isabella tugged on his sleeve. Mr. Robert, what do we do first? The question was so practical, so trusting, that Robert felt that crack in his chest widen a little more. First, we need to get you a dress and shoes, and everything else you need to feel like a princess. A princess? Isabella breathed. Every girl should feel like a princess at least once, Robert said. Especially girls who are brave enough to ask strangers for help. Carmen was shaking her head again. Mr. Chun, we can't afford ... You're not paying for anything, Robert interrupted gently. This is my contribution to making sure Isabella has the best night of her life. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through contacts. There's a boutique in this hotel, very nice place. They specialize in formal wear for children. I'm going to call them and set up an appointment for tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon? Carmen looked panicked. But I have to work. I can't. Miss my shift at the diner. Robert paused his scrolling. He was so used to having unlimited time and resources that he sometimes forgot other people had constraints. What time do you finish at the diner? 3 o'clock, Carmen said. But then I have to come here by 6 to start my evening shift. Perfect, Robert said. We'll meet at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. That gives you an hour to get here from the diner, and we'll have plenty of time to get Isabella ready before you have to start work. Isabella was practically vibrating with excitement. What kind of dress do you think I should get? Robert considered this seriously. What kind of dress do you want? Blue, Isabella said immediately. Like the ocean. And maybe with some sparkles. But not too many, I don't want to look silly. You could never look silly, Robert said. But blue with just a few sparkles sounds perfect. Carmen was still holding his business card, looking like she was in some kind of dream. Mr. Chun, I have to ask ... Why are you doing this? Really? Robert looked at Isabella, who was now spinning in a little circle, imagining herself in her future dress. Then he looked at Carmen, this woman who worked 3 jobs and still found time to teach her daughter about honesty and kindness and courage. Because, he said slowly, I built a very successful company, but I never built a family. I have a big house, but it's empty. I go to fancy parties, but I don't have anyone to share them with. And this little girl reminded me that the best things in life aren't things you buy. They're moments you share with people who matter. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. Isabella matters to you? But you just met her. Robert watched Isabella, who was now practicing dance steps on the sidewalk, completely lost in her own joy. Some people come into your life and change everything in just a few minutes. Isabella is one of those people. He looked at his phone again. I'm going to call the boutique now. The owner's name is Mrs. Patterson. She's very good with children, and she'd take excellent care of Isabella. As he dialed the number, Robert realized that for the first time in years, he was genuinely excited about something. Not excited about a business deal or a financial opportunity, but excited about seeing a little girl's face when she found the perfect dress. Mrs. Patterson, he said when the call connected. This is Robert Chun. I need a favor, and I need it to be perfect. Isabella stopped spinning and looked up at him with those trusting brown eyes. In the background, her mother was wiping away tears and probably wondering if this was all some kind of beautiful dream, but Robert knew it wasn't a dream. It was the beginning of something real, something that would change all of their lives, in ways they couldn't even imagine yet, and it all started with one brave little girl who believed that strangers could be kind. The next afternoon, Robert found himself in a place he had never been before, the children's section of Patterson's boutique, sitting in a small velvet chair that was definitely not made for a 6-foot-tall businessman. His expensive suit looked completely out of place among the tiny mannequins wearing flower girl dresses and miniature tuxedos. Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and silver hair, had been running this boutique for 30 years. She had dressed children for every kind of special occasion imaginable, but she had never had a request quite like Robert's phone call the night before. Mr. Chun, she had said when he called, in all my years of business, I've never had someone ask me to make a little girl feel like a princess for a father-daughter dance when he's not actually her father. Well, Robert had replied, there's a first time for everything. Now, as he waited for Isabella and Carmen to arrive, Robert felt more nervous than he had before any business presentation. What if Isabella didn't like what they found? What if he was doing too much? What if he was not doing enough? The boutique door chimed, and Isabella walked in holding her mother's hand. She was wearing the same jeans and pink sweater from the night before, but her hair was freshly braided and her face was glowing with excitement. Mr. Robert? She called out when she saw him, letting go of Carmen's hand and running over to him. Is this really where we're going to find my dress? This is the place, Robert said, standing up from his tiny chair. Mrs. Patterson here is the best dress finder in the whole city. Mrs. Patterson smiled warmly at Isabella. Well, hello there, sweetheart. You must be the young lady who needs a very special dress for a very special evening. Isabella nodded eagerly. It's for the father-daughter? Dance at my school. And Mr. Robert is going to be my father for the night. Mrs. Patterson looked at Robert with new understanding in her eyes. Well then, we better make sure you look absolutely perfect. Carmen stood near the entrance, still looking like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. Mrs. Patterson, we really appreciate you staying open late for us. Nonsense! Mrs. Patterson waved her hand. This is exactly the kind of project I love. Now, Isabella, tell me about this dance. What kind of dress are you dreaming of? Isabella's eyes lit up as she described her perfect dress, blue like the ocean, with just enough sparkles to catch the light, comfortable enough to dance in, and beautiful enough to make her feel special. Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. I think I have just the thing. But first, let's get your measurements. As Mrs. Patterson led Isabella to the fitting area, Robert noticed Carmen looking at the price tags on some of the dresses nearby. Her face went pale. Carmen, Robert said quietly, remember what I said yesterday. Don't look at the prices. This is my gift. Mr. Chun, Carmen whispered, these dresses cost more than I make in 2 weeks. This is too much. Robert looked through the boutique window at the busy street outside, where people hurried past focused on their own problems and goals. Carmen, can I tell you something? Last month, I spent more money on a dinner that I ate alone than any of these dresses cost. And that dinner didn't make anyone happy, least of all me. He turned back to look at Isabella, who was giggling as Mrs. Patterson measured her arms. But seeing Isabella smile yesterday made me happier than I've been in years. So please let me do this. From the fitting area, they heard Isabella gasp. Oh my goodness, Mom, come look at this. Mrs. Patterson emerged with Isabella, who was now wearing the most beautiful blue dress Robert had ever seen. It was exactly the color of deep ocean water, with tiny crystals scattered across the skirt that caught the light like stars. The dress had short sleeves and came down to just below Isabella's knees, perfect for dancing. Carmen's hand flew to her mouth. Isabella, you look like a princess, Isabella finished, spinning around so the skirt flared out. Look, Mr. Robert, the sparkles move when I dance. Robert felt that familiar tightness in his throat. Isabella looked absolutely radiant. But more than that, she looked confident and happy and special, exactly how every 8-year-old should. Feel, it's perfect, he said, his voice a little rough. But we're not done yet. Mrs. Patterson brought out a pair of silver shoes that matched the dress perfectly, along with a small tiara that wasn't too fancy but caught the light beautifully. When Isabella moved her head, every princess needs a crown, Mrs. Patterson said as she placed it gently on Isabella's head. Isabella looked at herself in the full-length mirror and didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, very quietly, she said, I look like the girls in the movies. Carmen was crying now, not even trying to hide her tears. Isabella, you are the most beautiful little girl in the world. Mrs. Patterson disappeared into the back room and returned with a small silver purse. Every lady needs somewhere to keep her important things, she said, handing it to Isabella. What kind of important things? Isabella asked. Well, Mrs. Patterson said seriously, a little lip gloss, maybe a hair clip in case you need to fix your hair, and perhaps a photo from your special evening. Robert watched all of this and realized he was witnessing something he had never experienced before. The simple joy of making someone else happy without expecting anything in return. All his business successes had been about winning, about beating competitors, about making more money. But this felt completely different. Mrs. Patterson, Robert said, could you do one more thing for us? Of course. Could you arrange for someone to do Isabella's hair, something special for tonight? I have the perfect person in mind, Mrs. Patterson said. My daughter Lisa works at the salon next door. She loves doing hair for special occasions. Isabella looked like she might explode from excitement. Really? Someone is going to do my hair too? The full princess treatment, Robert confirmed as. Mrs. Patterson went to call her daughter. Isabella walked over to Robert. In her dress and tiara, she somehow looked both grown-up and very much like a little girl at the same time. Mr. Robert, she said seriously, why are you being so nice to me? Robert knelt down so they were eye to eye. How could he explain to an 8-year-old that she had reminded him what it felt like to care about something beyond himself? Because, he said finally, you did something very brave yesterday. You asked for help when you needed it. And you trusted a stranger to keep his promise. Those are very grown-up things to do. Isabella thought about this. My mom says that when people are kind to you, you should always remember to be kind to other people too. Your mom is very smart, Robert said. Mr. Robert, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you nervous about the dance? Because I'm a little nervous, Robert realized that, yes, he was nervous. He was nervous about dancing in front of a room full of people. He was nervous about whether Isabella would have a good time. He was nervous about whether he would know how to act like a father, even for just one evening. I am nervous, he admitted. But you know what? What? Sometimes the best things happen when you're nervous. Because that means you care about doing something right? Isabella smiled. Then I guess it's good that we're both nervous. Mrs. Patterson returned with her daughter Lisa, a young woman with gentle hands and a warm smile. Isabella, are you ready to get your hair done like a real princess? As they prepared to move to the salon next door, Isabella took Robert's hand. Her small fingers felt warm and trusting in his much larger hand. Mr. Robert, she said, this is already the best day of my whole life, and the dance hasn't even started yet. Robert squeezed her hand gently. Isabella, I have a feeling this is just the beginning. And as they walked toward the salon, Robert realized that for the first time in his adult life, he was about to do something that had nothing to do with business or money or success. He was about to take a little girl to a school dance, and somehow that felt like the most important thing he had ever done. 2 hours later, Robert stood outside Lincoln Elementary School, adjusting his tie for the third time. He had changed from his business suit into something more appropriate for a school dance: dark pants, a crisp white shirt, and a blue tie that matched Isabella's dress. In his hand, he carried a small corsage that Mrs. Patterson had suggested, a delicate white flower with a blue ribbon. The school parking lot was filled with cars, and Robert could see fathers and daughters walking toward the brightly lit gymnasium. Some of the little girls wore simple dresses, others had elaborate gowns, but they all had one thing in common: they were glowing with excitement and holding tightly to their father's hands. Robert's phone buzzed. A text from Carmen: "We're here." Isabella can't stop looking at herself in the car mirror. Robert smiled and walked toward Carmen's old Honda Civic, which looked a bit out of place among the newer cars in the parking lot. As he approached, the car door opened and Isabella stepped out. Robert stopped walking. The transformation was even more stunning than it had been in the boutique. Isabella's hair had been styled in soft curls that cascaded over her shoulders, with small blue flowers woven throughout. Her makeup was subtle but perfect, just a touch of lip gloss and some sparkle around her eyes. The dress looked even more beautiful under the evening lights, and the tiara caught the glow from the school windows. But what took Robert's breath away wasn't how beautiful Isabella looked. It was the confidence radiating from her. She stood taller, smiled brighter, and moved with the grace of someone who felt truly special. "Mr. Robert," Isabella called out, practically floating toward him. "Look, Lisa made my hair look like a fairy tale princess." "Isabella," Robert said, his voice full of genuine wonder, "you look absolutely magnificent." Carmen stepped out of the car behind her daughter, and Robert could see tears in her eyes again. "Mr. Chun, I don't know how to thank you. She hasn't stopped smiling since we left the salon." Robert held out the corsage to Isabella. "Every lady needs flowers for a special evening," he said. Isabella gasped. "Is that for me?" "Of course it's for you." As Robert carefully pinned the corsage to her dress, Isabella stood perfectly still, like she was afraid to move and break the magic spell. "Mr. Robert, I feel like Cinderella." "Well then," Robert said, offering her his arm, "shall we go to the ball?" Isabella giggled and took his arm, and together they walked toward the school entrance. Other families were arriving at the same time, and Robert noticed some of the fathers looking at him curiously. A few recognized him from magazine covers or business news, but most were simply wondering about the well-dressed stranger escorting the radiant little girl. Inside the gymnasium, the school had been transformed. Streamers hung from the ceiling. Round tables covered in white tablecloths surrounded a makeshift dance floor, and a DJ was playing music that made all the children smile. The room buzzed with excitement as little girls showed off their dresses, and fathers tried to remember how to dance. Isabella's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, spotted them as soon as they entered. She was a warm woman in her 40s who had been teaching third grade for 15 years. But she had never seen one of her students look quite as radiant as Isabella did tonight. "Isabella!" Mrs. Rodriguez exclaimed. "You look absolutely beautiful. And you must be—" She paused, looking at Robert questioningly. "I'm Robert," he said simply. "Isabella's date for the evening, double quotes." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "Well, Robert, you have excellent taste in dance partners. Isabella, all your friends have been asking if you were coming tonight." "They have!" Isabella's face lit up even more. "Oh, yes. Katie and Mia and Sophie have been saving you a seat at their table." Isabella looked up at Robert. "Can we go sit with my friends?" "This is your night," Robert said. "We'll do whatever makes you happy." As they made their way to the table where Isabella's classmates were sitting, Robert noticed the other little girls' reactions. They weren't staring because Isabella looked out of place. They were staring because she looked like a princess who had stepped out of a storybook. "Isabella?" A little girl in a pink dress called out. "You came, and your dress is so pretty." Thank you, Katie, Isabella said, settling into her chair with careful grace. This is Mr. Robert. He's my date for tonight. The other fathers at the table nodded politely at Robert, and he found himself in the surreal situation of making small talk about school projects and weekend soccer games. But instead of feeling out of place, Robert discovered he was genuinely interested in these conversations about normal family life. When the music started, Isabella looked at Robert nervously. Mr. Robert, I should probably tell you that I practiced dancing in my room last night, but I'm still not very good at it. Robert stood up and offered her his hand. Isabella, I should probably tell you that I haven't danced since my high school prom, which was about 30 years ago. So we'll figure it out together. The dance floor was filled with fathers and daughters moving to a slow, gentle song. Some pairs were graceful, others were clearly making it up as they went along, but everyone was smiling. Robert and Isabella found a spot on the dance floor, and he showed her how to put one hand on his shoulder while he held her other hand. As they began to sway to the music, Isabella looked up at him with pure joy. Mr. Robert, this is even better than I dreamed it would be. You know what, Isabella? It's better than I dreamed too. As they danced, Isabella chattered about everything, her friends' dresses, the decorations, the music, how the punch tasted like fruit candy. But then, during a quieter moment in the song, she said something that made Robert's chest tighten. Mr. Robert, do you think my real dad would have liked dancing with me? Robert looked down at this little girl who trusted him enough to ask such a vulnerable question. Isabella, any father would be lucky to dance with someone as wonderful as you. Your real dad is missing out on knowing an amazing little girl. Isabella nodded thoughtfully. Mom says that sometimes people leave not because of anything we did wrong, but because they have problems they can't fix. She says we can't control what other people do, but we can control how we choose to be happy anyway. Your mom is very wise, Robert said, marveling at the maturity of this 8-year-old who had somehow learned lessons that many adults never figured out. When the song ended, Isabella hugged Robert tightly. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Thank you for making me feel special. But Robert realized that Isabella had it backward. She was the one who had made him feel special. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. As the evening continued, Robert found himself genuinely enjoying every moment. He took pictures with Isabella and her friends, helped serve cake, and even learned a group dance that all the children insisted he participate in. He watched Isabella laugh and play and dance, and he realized that her happiness had become the most important thing in the world to him near the end of the evening. During the last dance, Isabella looked up at Robert with serious eyes. Mr. Robert, can I ask you something? Always. After tonight, are we still going to be friends? The question hit Robert like a physical blow. In all his planning for this evening, he hadn't thought about what would happen afterward. Would he go back to his empty house and his meaningless routine? Would Isabella go back to being just a memory of one magical night? Isabella, Robert said carefully, would you like us to still be friends? More than anything, she said immediately. Then we'll be friends, Robert promised. Good friends don't just disappear after one perfect evening. Isabella smiled so brightly that Robert felt like the whole gymnasium had gotten brighter. Really? We can still see each other sometimes. I think your mom and I need to have a conversation about that, Robert said. But yes, I'd like that very much. As the evening wound down and families began to leave, Robert realized that this night had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. He had come here thinking he was doing a favor for a little girl, but Isabella had given him something much more valuable than anything he could give her. She had given him a family. Walking back to the parking lot, Isabella slipped her small hand into Robert's. Mr. Robert, this was the most perfect night of my whole life. Robert squeezed her hand gently. Mine too, Isabella, mine too. And as they reached Carmen's car, where Isabella's mother was waiting with tears of gratitude in her eyes, Robert knew that this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning.